Today is a really big day at Hope for Life, and I want to begin with a simple question. Does what we do as a local church and as this local church, as Hope for Life Christian Fellowship, does what we do matter? And how much does it matter? And we can acknowledge, and I'm not complaining, I'm observing, we can acknowledge that we live in a cultural moment that says that the answer is not really. Not really. But is that true? What are the stakes of what we do as a local church? Let me begin reminding you of three facts, three things. First, all kinds of people in our families, on our streets, in our workplaces, in our city, in our world, all kinds of people are experiencing a Christless present, and they are moving towards a Christless eternity. And I'm reminded of the book of Romans in chapter 10, when Paul says, how can you believe in someone you haven't heard about? And how can you hear if somebody doesn't preach? And that part of our mission as a church, part of what matters so much, is that we spread the gospel. Second fact, the Bible talks continuously with metaphors like the world is full of darkness and Jesus is leading us towards light. The world is under the dominion of the evil one, that's Acts 26, and Jesus has come to set us free from our slavery to sin. There are so many places of literal and proverbial darkness in our world, and I want to remind you of our Savior, who, as he began his public ministry, he said he was there to bind up the brokenhearted, to preach good news to the poor, to reach out to the disenfranchised, to see justice and mercy move forward, that God's kingdom was breaking in. The third thing I want to remind you of is that as a church a couple of years ago, we spent a huge amount of time praying and seeking God's will for this local church, believing that what we do matters. And at the top of that list, and among a very short list of things God led us to, was that we need to be more engaged in God's mission, word and deed. And so here we are. And all of that is important to what we're talking about today. Today, a document's being sent out that will explain what Hope for Life is doing in a lot more detail. It won't answer all of your questions, but it will give you a whole bunch more information about where we're going over this next year. So read it carefully, read it twice, read it prayerfully, read it thoughtfully. In the next year, on the first, third, and if there's a fifth Sunday, the fifth Sundays of the month, we're going to be having church, much as we've always had it. And on the second and fourth Sundays, we're not going to have a larger church gathering. We're setting them aside for what we call missional micro-churches. Missional micro-churches, MMCs. MMCs are going to be built around one of two things. They're either going to be built around having a common mission together, or around a divergent mission. In other words, equipping one another to live out the missions that God has given us individually. MMCs will be built around a common mission together, or equipping one another to go out and serve the way God is calling us individually. We are doing this, one, because we think God is leading us here and has been leading us here for a while, and we'll be glad to explain that. We've never played that card lightly at Hope for Life, and we're not playing it lightly now, but we think, the leadership board and the staff think, that God's leading us this way. And second, we think it makes sense. We think that when you look at the never-changing purpose of God's church everywhere and every time, and when you look at our seasonal priorities, the things that we think God led us uniquely at Hope for Life to focus on in the next season, we think this is the right way forward. And we think that large church services and missional microchurches will complement one another in a way that will help us be faithful to what God is leading us to. MMCs are smaller groups of people. The size will be dictated by the mission, really. They are built around a mission. That is the heartbeat of an MMC, but there's other key priorities, and the document talks about what that stuff is. These are little churches, And so they're going to do the stuff that churches do. MMCs are going to be a place of low control. We're not going to spell out how often you meet exactly and when you meet exactly and how you accomplish things like mission. That's going to be up to you, but we are going to give a high degree of support, and there's going to be a high degree of accountability. We're not just doing whatever we want. We are pursuing faithfulness to our calling and to the unchanging calling of the Church of Jesus Christ. MMCs are going to be open. You can join one, you can leave one, you can start one. We'll help you. And this is critical. MMCs are going to be built around everyone engaging. So many times we hear things like, yeah, the mission of God is important, but that's for other people, right? More educated people, smarter people, more confident people, kinder people, less introverted people, and we have all kinds of things that go on in our minds, but no. We're doing this in part because we believe, as we've always believed at Hope for Life, that God is calling each one of us to engage what He's up to. For the next 3 weeks, we're in what we're calling the mission design phase. And what we're doing is two things, really. One, this is new for some of you. This may not even be welcome news to some of you. And many of you will have questions. Many of you will have concerns. We've tried really hard to construct a great document. And again, read it. But you'll have more questions, you'll have more concerns. And so in the next several weeks, there's going to be space for staff and board members to meet with you and talk with you one-on-one. If you have questions, if you have concerns, please let me buy you a coffee. Let my dad buy you a coffee. Talk to your favorite board member. Let's address those questions and concerns. Many people on the board, when we first started thinking about doing this, were not convinced. And we'd be shocked if everybody at Hope for Life is immediately convinced either. Through prayer and discussion, we came to a place of being unanimous, but that wasn't immediate. The second thing we're doing in the next couple weeks is we're going to be putting together the first round of MMCs. And so there's others of you don't so much have questions or concerns. You're excited, you're ready to go. And so again, please, as soon as possible, reach out to a board member, reach out to my dad, reach out to me. And we'll investigate together what kind of things we might build microchurches around and how you might be involved. You are not committing to anything beyond an initial conversation if you reach out to us. If you have ideas, let's talk. In 3 weeks, we will be opening up sign up for the first round of missional microchurches, and we expect more will be launched in the days ahead. You don't need to worry about joining the wrong one. The groups are open, and at the front end of this process, there will be some figuring out and discerning where is God leading you to be. And so sign up will begin in a few weeks, and we expect the MMCs to launch, to have their first meetings the week of September 12th. So let me wrap up and go back to that question we started with. We believe that the stakes of what we do as a local church are extraordinary, despite a world that largely says otherwise, and despite the fact that sometimes as Christians, we don't even believe this. The stakes of what we do matter. And so I know that what we're doing isn't comfortable. I know that we've just come through COVID. The board discussed that extensively. I know that some of us have hardly seen each other in a year, and some of us might be wondering, why are we making such a big change right now? We're making this change because we sense God calling, and because we think it's going to help us as a whole, not just as individuals, but as Hope for Life, to be faithful to what God is calling us to. We think God's taking us on an adventure with Him, and we're excited to see where that leads. Read the document, ask your questions, engage the process of launching MMCs. I am really excited about what we're doing, and I think the same thing, the board members would say the same thing. I'm excited to see what God does in our midst. I'm excited to see where the darkness gets pushed back. I'm excited, I hope, to see baptisms. And I think you will be too. God bless.